Alright, what's going on YouTube? Before we start, I feel like I must confess something. This year has not been my best Caitlyn year. Right along Twitch, which is a whole other story by the way, they are two of my most played champs and I have awful win rates on them. Caitlyn has been pretty ridiculous for a while, having over 50% win rate ever since Infinity Edge, Zeal, and its derivatives got cost reduced in patch 7.9. So there was clearly something wrong about the way I was playing, but for the life of me I could simply not figure out why. To not drag the story too long, after quite a bit of investigating and tutorials, I finally managed to realize one of the many things I didn't do well on her: traps. Traps are quintessential for her playstyle, and are honestly the ability which really make her stand out. The difference between a good Caitlyn and a great Caitlyn is most of the time how good they are at placing traps. So in this video, we tackle all I know to this point on this topic, so that hopefully you save a lot of time trying to source these techniques from different sources. So without further ado, let me show you how to trap. Alright, so the first kind of traps I want to show you are the traps that are more commonly used during the laning phase. These traps are particularly important because as Caitlyn, you usually siege your opponent very often because of her Q and her long range. So people usually tend to be under their tower rather than you being under yours. So sieging an enemy tower as Caitlyn is extremely easy. Once you have them pinned under the tower, all you really gotta do is put traps in this area, like this. Because at the end of the day, what Caitlyn traps actually are a way of controlling how your opponent moves in the map. This means that the only side in which they can walk in and out of to farm is through there, but the caster minions actually step over here where I'm pinging. So in order to take that CS, they're either going to have to eat a trap or step through that area right there. And if you have a smart support, he'll usually just step in here. So for a support to just guard that little bit of area is extremely easy as opposed to the whole range of the tower. And also it's very common for people who are getting sieged to stand behind their tower. So if they're there, they're usually not going to get any minions from your siege. So that's just one great way of using Caitlyn traps offensively. Much like on the red side, if we're sieging blue side, all we have to do is just put them in the same configuration right here to make sure that our enemies, and this trap right here is a special kind of trap. We're going to take a look at those in a second. In this configuration, enemies will not be able to walk through your traps, but of course you need a fourth trap, which is kind of difficult to acquire all of those traps in the lane phase. I mean, I'm talking early as level 6 or level 5, etc. That's when it gets a little bit dicey, but later on, if you're still in lane and you still haven't taken down your enemy's turret, this can be a valid configuration to prevent them from getting anywhere near their CS. Obviously important to mention also throughout the laning phase, if you are in the lane and you're not sieging anyone yet, you can use your traps in these areas right here, making sure that it's used in the correct direction, right? If the enemy team is blue side, you're gonna want this trap and this trap because that's where they're gonna walk into the bush safely. So if they walk in through here, you get a free trap. If they walk in through here, you get a free trap. And if they're red side, you're gonna want to put them here and here because those are the spots where red side would be walking into bushes. On the other hand, Caitlyn's traps throughout the lane are pretty useful when it comes to making sure you don't get ganked, because right here usually there's the blast cone plant. Let me just look it up and see if it's there. Here we go. So blast cone usually lands the jungler, as you can see, either here or here, and you can pretty much take care of that. I'm a bit lazy, let me just teleport there. You can take care of that by putting one trap down right there, and that way you make sure that if the enemy jungler blast cones in, let me just show you again. If the enemy jungler blast cones into you, they're always either falling on this trap or they're walking directly into it. So that's another way to use the traps defensively. If you're on red side, however, and the jungler's coming from blue side, it's still a lot easier to just take care of it. There's no real way to evade a jungler gank by using traps. The traps, when you're red side, are usually better used on the lane. But if you really don't have any vision and you need some sort of way to mitigate a gank, you can utilize this configuration of traps, which you usually should have 2 traps, and there's no way that they walk into this bush and not step on them. Like, the character models are not big enough. So you only need 2, but you need to space them out properly, because if you leave a gap, they do have time to react and step over the trap. But what about if you're getting sieged? What about if you're the one that's under your tower? Well, you can use the traps to control the flow of your enemies as well. At the end of the day, that's pretty much all they do. So what you could do is set up a defensive line like this, and make sure that your enemies only walk down through this area right here, which is one of the ways you can utilize them. But the problem with this strategy, I mean, it's not really a problem, but it's still a lot of room for them to walk around. So at the end of the day, you're really not getting that much done, but I mean, it's still useful. However, I would say it's better, since the traps have an internal cooldown, to try to avoid as much as possible to use them defensively when it comes to sieging. Because if you get sieged, eventually, like, the wave's gonna hit your tower, and then you can just push it out and use them offensively where they really shine. Alright, so moving on to the river and the jungle. When it comes down to these spots, what you really want to think about is, where are the enemy champions going to come from? And how can I make sure that I control their flow to make sure they only walk through either one side or the other. So if you're playing blue side, for example, and enemy champions are coming in from this side of the jungle, because you're taking dragon or something, usually it's a good idea to, like, cut off one of their paths, either this one, which is like the easiest one to cut off, or the other one right here. It kind of depends on whether, if you know they're gonna come from this side or this side, but it boils down to just controlling their flow so that you know exactly where they're gonna come from, and your team can react accordingly. Either they step on a trap and they take a bunch of damage from one of your crits, or they're gonna have to route through another side. So controlling the flow of fights is usually very important. And when it comes down to bushes in the jungle, usually it's pretty much the same as with the bushes in the lane. So you'd put down a trap in the start of the bush that you think they're gonna walk through. Also, I forgot to mention that whether if you're on a side turret or on a mid turret, the line of traps is pretty much used the same way. I'd always just come over here, make sure I block off this area, which is a part where people love to step on, and put a line of traps through after the tower as big as I can to cut off as many spots as they can walk through, pretty much. But however, this is the same for all these towers. For this tower or this tower, it's exactly the same. Well, it changes when it comes down to the actual base towers. Because right here, what you can do, and this is actually a great way to either siege or defend, is you can block off both of these choke points. Like this. Either like this or like this. 3 traps on one side, 2 traps on the other side, depending on where your enemy is. And you can just hit the tower when your creep wave eventually hits here on a siege. You just auto attack the tower from range with a lot of room, because you don't have to worry about people walking through the places where you're trapped. But most importantly, once you take down this tower, you're gonna want to take the inhibitor. So what you can do is you can step on here, and as you can tell, my auto attack range is long enough to hit the inhibitor. So you can put down those trap lines and hit the inhibitor exactly from where I'm standing. And usually it's a pretty good defense, especially if you have a support around. People do have to think a lot about how they're gonna approach your traps in order to move around them, because they're really annoying and obnoxious. And when you're sieging blue side, it's exactly the same thing. You can pretty much just put them down here. And this is another one of those traps that we're going to talk about in a second. You can barely notice it, but I placed a trap over there. And yeah, it pretty much does the same thing. You would auto attack this tower, and then once you get close enough, you would hit the inhibitor from afar. Okay, so how about if you're the one getting sieged? Well, in that case, it's going to kind of depend on whether if your tower is up or not. If your tower is up, you usually want to use this config, trying to make sure you don't overlap them like I just did. And in that way you keep a line between your enemy and your base. However, ranged champions still do somehow have enough range to attack the tower from here. Some champions do, some champions don't. But the point is that your tower is not taking as much damage as it usually would, because people would not dare step into that line, especially if your whole team is around, because that cuts off their escape route. But generally, that's the configuration you want to do if you're getting sieged. However, if your if your base tower is already gone, you can use the same configuration of the traps that you put down here, because as you can see, they cut off. They give the opponent a little bit more room, but it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, you're cutting off a lot more efficiently the two different choke points in which they can walk through. Alright, now let's talk about a special kind of traps. Now this kind of traps you can use sieging, you can use defending, it's pretty much whatever. There's no strategy involved into using this kind of traps, other than really just understanding the camera angle in League of Legends and using that to your advantage. So, as you can tell, there are a couple of items here in this map, like these towers. My champion can snugly hide behind that tower. So if my champion can do that from certain angles, so you can tell there are angles which are a little bit more obnoxious than others, but what you can't do is use that to your advantage, since your traps actually have a height and they're not very discernible from just their little aura thing. So if I put a trap right here, as you can tell, I can barely see the trap and the circle. And in a chaotic situation, it's going to be completely just retarded that someone can just notice that from a glance. So these are the kind of traps that are really, really, really strong, that a lot of people don't use often enough as Caitlyn. Another good example would be to put a trap down right there, or perhaps right here, for instance. Just think, what would my camera look like if it were over there, and try to put the camera on that blind spot. Let me show you some on... Hang on, let me just TP here to the bottom lane. Let me show you some on the bottom lane, which is usually where they're really, really useful, because people don't see them at all. And one of the spots would be right here. Imagine that my champion's sitting here, and I have to farm or I have to walk to my lane. If the trap is in any of these spots, it's going to be kind of difficult, because I want to have my camera over on this side, so maybe perhaps even here would be a good spot. But the point is, you want to make it as hard as possible for your opponent to detect them with their eyes. So they have to walk into the trap to find out that there was a trap in the first place. And a similar thing happens over here. If you put them directly behind this tower, they're just completely invisible. It's really, really hard to notice them right away. Especially on this side. On red side, it's especially strong because of the camera angle. Over here, you have to kind of fiddle with as you can see, it's kind of easy for me to just notice the traps. But over here, I mean, I seriously have to go through through a lot of effort to even notice that. And if your opponent gets trapped under the tower, this is even better, because they don't know whether the trap is there or not. So if they get trapped once, what they'll start to do is just not walk behind the tower. They start to just walk behind the tower like this, which means that around the tower is even more area that you're controlling as Caitlyn, just by the mere fact that a trap could be there, and that's frightening enough for you to control that area. And finally, we're going to take a look at animation canceling and traps. This is one of the most complicated Caitlyn mechanics, and I think it's part of why I never really performed too well as Caitlyn, because I didn't know how to do this. But it's an extremely useful tactic that can not only get you a lot of kills, but it can also help you escape ganks and whatnot. So let's take a look at how it works. Basically, what you want to do is, since most of Caitlyn's attacks, or abilities rather, as you can see, they have a wind-up time, or a cast time, right here. Everything on Caitlyn's kit has a cast time. And there's the usual combo on Caitlyn would be to E someone and then Q right away. And that way you're eating pretty much the E animation by casting the Q animation on top of it. But it's kind of a little known fact that you can do that as well with the traps, because at the end of the day, the traps are just another one of those animations that have a little cast time associated with them. So you can do this and drop a trap right as you're flying away, which means you can get 2 headshots right away. And if you have a charged headshot from your regular headshot count, you can get even up to 3 headshots on just one combo, which is a ton of damage. So you can get the headshot from the E, the trap, and then once the trap procs, you get another one. It's kind of important that you realize though that you have to know kind of what your enemy is going to walk towards, because the slow isn't very good on her E. Her E only has a 50% slow. So if you think your enemy is going to keep moving forward, usually you're going to want to put the trap closer to yourself. But if you think once you hit them with the trap, your enemy is going to walk towards a certain direction, you're going to want to put them behind them. It is also really important to know that if you're really far away, you're not going to be able to pull this trick off, because you still need to be in range for the trap. So let's just try to step here as far away as possible for me to be able to hit my E. Can I hit the E? Nope. Hang on. So I want to be as far away as possible. There you go. I still managed to put down the trap. The range is actually kind of ridiculous, but sometimes it actually doesn't work, and I'm obviously hitting a stationary target, which makes it a lot easier, but you're going to have to be kind of careful with that. So again, how the combo would essentially work now on actual practice would be to E back, then W, and then get both the headshots. So it looks something like this. You get the first headshot, and then you get the trap headshot. And I mean, you can even barely tell that I'm putting down the trap. That's just how strong that combo actually is. This is especially useful when you're kiting someone, but you have to be a little bit careful in that regard. Because if you put the trap on top of them, since the trap has a little arm time, which is actually 1.2 seconds, I'm not that sure. It's going to be somewhere here in the screen. There you go. It's right here. Right there. Anyway, since they have that little arm time, you have to make sure that you hit the arm time so that when they walk towards the trap, they actually trigger it right away. If I put it on top of the guy that I'm kiting, and that guy moves towards me, he's not gonna hit the trap. So you're gonna have to want to like auto attack and then put the trap in close enough to you so that he walks onto the trap, if that makes any sense. So not directly on top of the champion that you're actually trying to hit, but like close enough. Oh, canceled an auto attack. Feels bad. Yeah, that's pretty much it as far as I've been able to gather when it comes down to Caitlyn traps. I've been playing a lot of Caitlyn. I'm really trying to get good at this champion because, like I've told you guys, I haven't been performing too well on her, and it's definitely a shame because she's so strong, and I just couldn't grasp the fact that I was doing so poorly on her. So thanks so much for watching. Hopefully this showed you a thing or two about Caitlyn traps, and I'll see you guys on the next episode. Bye.